Every day, we walk past people without really seeing them. The man at the corner, holding a cardboard sign. The woman sitting quietly beside a wall. The faces that blend into the background of our busy lives. We tell ourselves, someone else will help. I don't have time today. Or maybe, what difference could I really make? But what if one small moment of kindness was all it took to change a life forever? His name was Michael. For years, he had lived on the streets, invisible, unheard, and forgotten. He wasn't always homeless. He once had a job, a home, and dreams for the future. But life, as it sometimes does, unraveled. A job lost. A family broken. A few bad turns, and suddenly, he found himself with nowhere to go. Days turned into months. Months into years. He learned to survive, but not to live. People looked away, avoiding eye contact, as if his pain might be contagious. He began to believe what the world seemed to be telling him, you don't matter. And then, one afternoon, a stranger stopped. She didn't rush by. She didn't drop a coin into his cup and hurry off. She looked him in the eyes, she smiled. And then she did something unexpected. She hugged him, no words, no questions, just a hug. In that moment, something broke inside him, not in pain, but in release. Years of isolation, shame, and silence melted away. That hug said what no words could. You are seen. You are worthy. You are human. That one gesture didn't solve everything overnight. It didn't give him a house or a job immediately. But it gave him something far more powerful, hope. Hope to believe that he could try again. Hope to reach out for help. Hope that kindness still existed in the world. A week later, he walked into a shelter for the first time in years. A month later, he began a job training program. A year later, he was living in a small apartment, his own space again. And he says, even now, that hug was the moment everything changed. It reminded me that I was still worth saving. Friends, that's the power of human connection. We underestimate what our presence can mean to someone else. We think kindness requires grand gestures, money, fame, or influence. But often, it's the smallest moments that carry the most weight. A hug, a smile, a word of encouragement. These are not small things. They are the very threads that hold humanity together. Rising tone, call to action. Every one of us has the power to be that stranger. To stop, to see, to care. You may never know the impact of your kindness, but someone, somewhere, will carry it for the rest of their life. Because kindness doesn't just change others, it changes us. It reminds us that beneath the layers of circumstance, beyond the labels of rich or poor, successful or struggling, we are all human. We all need to be seen. We all need to be loved. So, the next time you see someone who looks forgotten, remember Michael. Remember that one hug can start a ripple of hope strong enough to heal a soul. You might just be the moment that changes everything. Read every story of transformation begins with a moment. A simple, quiet moment when one heart reaches out to another. Not because it's convenient, not because it's easy, but because it's right. That's exactly what happened the day one stranger decided to stop and see. His name was Daniel. For years, he lived on the edge of society. A park bench was his bed. The sky was his ceiling. People walked by, some pretending not to notice, others too afraid to care. He had once been a teacher, a man with purpose, with a voice that inspired classrooms full of children. But life unraveled after a series of heartbreaks and losses. Addiction followed, then the streets, and soon Daniel stopped believing that anyone could see him for who he truly was. Until one afternoon, as the city buzzed around him, a woman stopped. She didn't have money to give. She didn't have answers, but she had something far more powerful, empathy. She knelt beside him. She said hello. And when she saw the tears in his eyes, she reached out and hugged him. That hug, that simple human act, became the turning point. For Daniel, it was the first time in years he had felt human touch without judgment. The first time someone had chosen connection over caution. Empathetic tone, building hope in that moment, everything shifted. It didn't erase his past, but it awakened something inside him, hope. He began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't too far gone. That hug was more than warmth. It was recognition. A message that whispered, "You still matter." A few days later, Daniel went to a community center. He asked for help. It wasn't easy, but it was a start. Slowly, he rebuilt his life, one small step at a time. And when he finally stood at the front of a classroom again, teaching children, he told them about the hug that changed everything. Friends, what if we all realized the power of one small act? We live in a world that celebrates grand gestures, $1,000,000 donations, public awards, viral moments. But the truth is, the real magic happens in the quiet corners of compassion. A smile, a kind word, a hand extended when someone has fallen. These are not small things, they are world-changing acts disguised as ordinary moments. That woman didn't just change Daniel's life. Her single act of kindness rippled outward, because Daniel went on to inspire hundreds of children, to teach them not just math and reading, but empathy, resilience, and the courage to care. One hug created a wave of compassion that reached countless hearts, and it all began with one person's choice to stop and see someone others had ignored. So I ask you, what's your small act today? Who is waiting for your kindness, your time, your attention? You may never know the impact you have, but somewhere, someone will remember you not for what you gave, but for how you made them feel. A hug, a smile, a moment of humanity, that's how we change the world. One small act at a time. Red hope doesn't always come wrapped in grand gestures or miracles. Sometimes it arrives quietly in the warmth of a hug, in the eyes of a stranger who decides to care. This is the story of one man and one moment that changed everything. His name was Robert. For years, he drifted through city streets, a shadow among millions. Each day looked the same, the shuffle of footsteps, the blur of faces, and the silent ache of being unseen. He had once been full of laughter, a father, a dreamer. But life has a way of taking sudden turns, a job lost, a family fractured, and a future that slowly faded into survival. He told himself, "I don't need anyone." But deep down, he longed for a sign, any sign, that the world still had room for him. Then one morning, as rain soaked the streets, a young woman stopped beside him. She didn't step around him like others did. She didn't avert her eyes, she smiled. And when she noticed him shivering, she did something unexpected. She wrapped her arms around him. Just a hug, simple, wordless, real. In that moment, something inside Robert broke open, not from pain, but from the sudden memory of being human. That hug didn't fix his problems, but it rekindled something he thought was gone forever, hope. That single act set a ripple in motion. The next day, he walked to a shelter he'd passed 100 times before. He asked for help, trembling, unsure, but ready. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. He began to heal. He started volunteering, helping others who once stood where he had. And when someone asked him what changed, he smiled and said, "It started with a hug." It's easy to underestimate the power we carry, the power of our presence, our empathy, our humanity. We think change must be big, loud, or public, but sometimes it's quiet. It's a moment when you choose to see the person, not the circumstance. To reach out, not turn away. That's what she did. She didn't give him money. She gave him something far more valuable: dignity. Imagine if each of us offered just one moment like that. A word of kindness to someone forgotten. A smile to someone who feels unseen. A hug to someone who's forgotten what love feels like. You never know who's fighting a silent battle. You never know whose life you might touch with a simple act of care. Because when we choose compassion over comfort, we light sparks that can grow into fires of hope. Robert's story isn't just about homelessness. It's about humanity, about how one act of love can rewrite a person's story. So when you leave here today, remember this: you carry the power to change a life, not through wealth or status, but through the courage to care. A hug, a smile, a moment of kindness, that's all it takes to spark hope, and maybe, just maybe, change everything. Every great change begins with one small act, not a revolution, not a movement, just a single moment of courage when someone chooses compassion over comfort. That's exactly what happened the day one stranger stopped to give a hug and unknowingly set off a ripple that would touch countless lives. Storytelling tone, gentle, visual. His name was David. For years, he lived without a home, invisible to the very city he once helped build. He wasn't lazy or lost by choice. Life had just fallen apart, piece by piece. He'd worked in construction, proud of the buildings that reached for the sky. But when the company closed and the bills piled up, everything crumbled. One bad month became one bad year. And soon, the man who had built homes for others no longer had one himself. He learned to live with silence, the kind that cuts deeper than hunger. Because silence means no one sees you, no one cares, no one remembers your name. Until one morning, as David sat outside a cafe, a woman walked out, holding a cup of coffee. She stopped. She looked at him, really looked at him, and then she said, "You look like you could use a hug." He hesitated, unsure, but she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. No speeches, no cameras, just one human being holding another. And for the first time in years, David felt something he'd almost forgotten: belonging. Reflective tone, warmth and hope. That moment changed the course of his life. The woman connected him to a local shelter. From there, he entered a job training program. A few months later, he was hired again, rebuilding homes, rebuilding trust. But here's where the story takes an even more powerful turn. David didn't stop at rebuilding his own life. He started volunteering. He began sharing his story, standing on stages, speaking to others who had lost hope. And soon, the man who once felt invisible became a voice of compassion in his community. Transition, leadership, and impact tone leaders. This story isn't just about homelessness. It's about humanity. Whether you lead a team, a company, or a family, you are creating ripples every single day. Every word you speak, every act of empathy, every moment you choose to listen, it all matters. We often think leadership is about strategy, vision, and success metrics. But true leadership begins with something deeper: the courage to care. The woman who hugged David didn't know she was changing a life. She didn't have a plan. She didn't make headlines. She just acted with heart. And because she did, a man rediscovered his purpose. A community found a leader, and hundreds of others found hope. That's the ripple effect of kindness. One small act, multiplied by time, trust, and humanity. So, the next time you wonder if your actions matter, remember this story. Remember that the smallest gesture can build bridges. That one conversation can restore confidence. And that one hug can spark a wave of change that touches lives you'll never meet. Because leadership isn't about how high you rise. It's about how many people you lift along the way. One hug, one choice, one ripple. That's how we change the world together. Some stories don't start with a spotlight. They begin quietly in the shadows, in silence, where someone has been forgotten by the world. This story is one of those. A story of a man, a moment, and a single act of kindness that would echo farther than anyone imagined. His name was Thomas. For years, he walked the streets with his head down, blending into the blur of the city, a ghost among millions. He had lost his job after an accident. One missed paycheck became two. Soon, he lost his home, his savings, his pride, and finally, his hope. People passed by him every day, glancing, judging, pretending not to see. The hardest part wasn't hunger. It was invisibility. He once said, "The day people stopped looking at me was the day I stopped feeling human." Then one winter afternoon, everything changed. A young man, a stranger, walked by, noticed him, and stopped. Not because of pity, but because he saw something familiar. He sat down next to Thomas. They talked, they laughed, and when they stood to say goodbye, the young man opened his arms and hugged him. Just a hug, simple, human, real. Thomas would later say, "That was the first time in years someone touched me without fear." Tone turns warm and inspiring. That single hug broke years of silence. It whispered what words could not. "You are seen, you are worthy." That night, Thomas cried. But for the first time, they were tears of release, not pain. The next day, he walked to a nearby shelter. The day after that, he enrolled in a recovery program. Within a year, he found work, helping others who had lost their homes. Within 2, he was mentoring others through the same darkness he once lived in. And the young man who gave him that hug. It's easy to forget how powerful we are, not because of what we have, but because of how we make others feel. We think we need status, wealth, or influence to make an impact. But the truth is, sometimes all the power you need lies in a moment of kindness. A smile, a word, a hug. That's all it takes to remind someone they still matter. You never know what someone's carrying inside. You never know whose life might be on the edge of giving up. But you have the power right now to change that story. To stop, to see, to connect. Because when we choose empathy over apathy, we don't just heal others, we heal the world around us. And just like that hug, your smallest gesture could become someone's turning point. Their spark of hope, their reason to keep going. Thomas's story reminds us of one eternal truth. We rise by lifting others. You don't have to change the whole world. Just change one moment for one person, and watch the ripples travel farther than you can ever imagine. One act of kindness, one heartbeat of compassion, one hug. That's how hope begins and how humanity survives.